good morning, and welcome to the Brenda Perryman Show right here on TV 33 WHPR, Comcast 90 in Detroit and Oakland County, and we are live. We have quite an interesting and exciting show for you today, and it's informative because we first have the candidate, my candidate, for Secretary of State of the state of Michigan, and that's Attorney Godfrey Dillard. Good morning, Godfrey.
Good morning, Brenda. Good to be here.
Good to be here. Godfrey and I go back quite a long way. We won't say how long,
Right.
but
We
a
don't
lot.
want to say that long. Right.
A long way. Now, Godfrey, why don't you first just give everybody? I'm sure they've heard it, but maybe everybody hasn't heard it. A little bit of your background.
Sure. Sure. My father was one of the original 100 Tuskegee Airmen, the 99 Fighter Squadron. Unfortunately, my father died when I was 4 years old. He was a young man, 36. I was raised by my mother and
She
grandmother.
was a wonderful woman.
And six kids. Started working at 7 years old, delivering Detroit Free Press to help with family finances. And you know I was an all-star football, basketball player.
From visitation.
And went on to be the first black in the SEC. A lot of people don't know what Southeast Conference, but it's Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi. I was the first black to play against a white athlete in the state of Mississippi, Starkville, Mississippi. So I felt the sting at a very young age of discrimination, racism, the name calling, things being thrown at me. I was a part of that civil rights movement. After that, I went on, graduated from the University of Michigan Law School. Practiced law here with Kenneth Cockrell, Milton Henry, Elliott Hall, you name them. I was there.
You've always been an activist, and
Yeah.
I met you at Eastern Michigan
right.
when we were there together.
Yeah, and I've worked with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, ACLU, Latino Legal Defense Fund, Asian, and of course I was a lead attorney in the University of Michigan affirmative action case that went to the United States Supreme Court. Had an opportunity to argue before the United States Supreme Court, and and then also I left town for a while. I became a diplomat. United people. I say diplomat. Which country? I say the United States of America. I'm an American.
What do you think?
Yeah,
what
right.
country?
But I was always focused in on these kinds of issues. I went to the Belgian Congo. I didn't go to Paris, France, or London or Belgium. I went to, and of course I'm fluent in French. I had a chance in the Congo. At Mobutu, had a chance to see a military dictatorship at a young age. I've been stopped at roadblocks, AK-47s, served my country in a war zone. Then I've done some postgraduate work, Master's in International Affairs at George Washington, postgraduate work at Columbia Law School. And, of course, my mother and grandmother were starting to get a little older, and I needed to come back and help them out. So I decided to come back to Detroit. And I've been practicing law, and now I'm on this I'm a chameleon. I'm always changing.
Right. Well, the one thing about it is that you're running for Secretary of State, and it would be good to have a legal person in there, a lawyer.
Yeah, well, I think we've never had Brenda. We've never had a lawyer as a Secretary of State, and a lot of people when they think about the Secretary of State's office, they think about it, motor vehicles, driver's license.
But there's so much more to it. And Godfrey, why don't you tell us exactly what the Secretary of State is?
All right. The Secretary of State is one of the four constitutional positions in Michigan. You have the governor, you have the attorney general, you have the lieutenant governor, and you have the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State is responsible for motor vehicle, but the number one thing the Secretary of State is concerned about is voting. Managing elections in the state. And people don't realize there is no federal constitutional right to voting. Rather, it's the states that control the voting process. So when I was thinking about this position, we see that voting is becoming more and more legalistic. You have the Voting Rights Act issue that's come up. You've got the United Citizen case coming up with campaign financing where they're saying corporations have a First Amendment right. And so I think the time is right for a lawyer. Is that the corporations
are people too?
Yeah, people and have First Amendment rights. So I think when I was thinking about running for this position, I said, Godfrey, you can come in, and we've got, it's the administration now. We're third worst state in the country for voter participation. Our voter participation has dropped 45%. percent.
What do you attribute that to?
Well, I think we focus too much on the symptoms. We focus too much on, the young people aren't involved. People aren't getting the right information. It's like the education thing. It's like, the parents aren't teaching the kids at home and things like that. My position is that we need to focus in on the structural burdens to voting. And what do I mean by the structural burdens to voting? We're talking about registration and voting. Take, for example, voting. There's no need for us to only vote on one day, Brenda.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I always talk about like the retail service person, somebody working at McDonald's or working at Sears. They get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, got to catch the bus, go to work, got to be there by 7:30. Got to get prepped to get open, 9 o'clock.
And of course, there are people like my daughter who works at Beaumont Hospital. They have 12-hour shifts. She has to be there at 7
right.
and get off at 7. And
right.
I mean, it's
and so they got 30 minutes for lunch. And then by the time they get off, it's 7, 8 o'clock, and the polls are closed.
Right.
Well, we could change that, and there's no constitutional reason why we can't. We could have 7 days to vote. We could have 2 days to vote. We could have weekend voting.
And they could do that church thing where the churches could go and vote on Sunday after church.
We could vote on Sunday. So those are the kinds of things I want to focus in on, and like registration. We have the National Voter Registration Act. When you go to the Secretary of State's office, you can often register. But why are we limited in that? The federal law says anywhere there's a federal agency, you can register, which means we could do it at the Social Security office, the Veterans Administration. We can do it at universities. We can do it at high schools. Got a lot of 18-year-olds who are in high school. We could register them in high school. So there's a lot of ways in which we can make it easier and more convenient for people to vote. And if we do that, then we can raise the participation up. So those are structural problems.
The funny thing, Godfrey, is it wasn't until a few years ago that I found out that people were voting on more days than just Tuesday.
Right,
because, I've been here and we registered here.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. Well, other states do it differently, and this whole problem with absentee ballots. We got absentee ballots, but we got all these restrictions on the back. You can't absentee ballot unless you're over 60 years old. You got to be out of town. We could remove that and say 45 days out, if you want to get an absentee ballot, you can get it. We can use technology, like the Democratic Party is now saying you go on your smartphone, you can type in a certain code, and you can apply for your absentee ballot right on your smartphone.
Really?
And mailed right to your home. And the Democratic Party is unveiling that right now. So there's technology.
When will that go into effect?
It's in effect right now.
People don't know.
I know. The Democratic Party is gradually trying to get that out. So those are, using technology to make it easier. So as I said, it's a lot like medicine. People often focus in on symptoms and don't really focus in on the causes. I'm very aggressive and progressive, and I'm not scared.
Right.
And so when I'm elected Secretary of State, the other thing I want to do is reduce the fees. I feel the marginalized communities, the idea that we have to pay for a license plate sticker every year. Other states allow you to do it every 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, reduce the cost. I'm also concerned about the fact that the current secretary has reduced the number of offices. Like here, you go into these offices up here on the boulevard, the Cadillac, they got you lined up like cattle. You don't have enough seats, not enough bathrooms, and then you're lucky by the time you get out, you got a $50 parking ticket waiting for you.
That is torture. Yes, and
you got a
I got a Detroit parking
ticket waiting for you. My idea is a super center, and this is not rocket science, Brenda. They're doing it around the country. You build a large building. You have 30, 40 lines, 30, 40 employees in one area, and you have directing people to different services that you want. You have free parking. And so we can use that as an economic development tool. We got all this free land and stuff. In, construction, create jobs, jobs, build the super centers in places like Detroit, Flint, Saginaw, Benton Harbor. And the bottom line, people will be able to get in quickly, out, and So
People
reducing
have to, right now, people have to carve out at least an hour and a half
Correct.
when they go into a Secretary of State's
right.
office. It could be more efficient. They have 2 or 3 people
Right,
working
that's
on
right,
you,
right.
and then somebody go in the back. Then you see this window
Right,
closed. They
then
go
you-
in the back.
Correct.
It is just not run well.
I was just speaking, and it's just not in places like Detroit. A Westland,
Right.
Westland lady, a white lady, came up to me and said, "Mr. Dillard, I went in to get a title transfer in Westland. It took me 4 hours to get 4 hours for a title transfer." And one of the things I want to try to do is on my website, we got, it's hashtag SOS SOS. I would like for people to send in to me your horror stories
And
about the Secretary of State.
Yeah, and
So I
maybe
can-
what if they have a suggestion?
Yes, suggestions or horror stories
Yeah.
that I can focus in on to try to get people to understand we don't have to have it this way.
Because it's so disheartening to walk into a Secretary of State's office and you see 100 people sitting.
Right, correct. And so you got to understand, we're dealing in an era of voter suppression by the Republican
Yes,
Party.
we are. Yes, we are.
And that's why they don't want you to vote, and that's why you notice that this Secretary of State, there's no public service announcements,
Nothing.
there's no education. People think we're a photo ID state. We're not a photo ID state.
No.
You don't have to have a photo ID. You
Right.
can sign an affidavit of who you are, and you can vote, and you can register.
We have Tom on the line. Good morning, Tom. How are you?
And both of you. I got a question in regards to, kids who are coming out of high school who will graduate, who will turn 18 before, I'd say either the August primary, which is passed, or before the general election, and they go away to college. Is there any kind of way that you would like, that you're going to fix it so that, these kids can vote absentee? Because the way it is right now, they would have to physically either go down, I think, to the clerk's office or come back and vote at their precinct, where they would be registered, rather than, having an absentee ballot mailed to them for them to send it back through the mail for their vote to count.
Right. That's another what I call structural barriers to voting. They don't want the young people to vote because they figure that most Republicans figure that they're going to be Democrats and they're going to vote against them. So, when I become Secretary of State, I expect to have a lot of pushback from the legislature. I'm hoping that people get out to vote and we have a Democratic legislature, because if we can get a Democratic legislature, there's no telling what we can do. So this is a critical time. But certainly, as Secretary of State, I'm going to allow students to vote at their colleges where they are, even though they're not physically present in Michigan. I mean, if they have registered in Michigan, and the fact that they are, say, in Ohio or Nashville or where they're, why shouldn't they be
My
able to
son
vote?
voted from overseas
Right.
with the absentee.
But see, the federal law provides for that because
Right.
they're in the federal service.
Right.
So what I'm trying to say is there are no constitutional reasons for these barriers. These
Right.
are policy decisions that people are made. When I say policy, I'm saying political decisions. And therefore we have the Republican Party suppressing the vote. That's why we have the emergency manager laws. That's why we have taxation of seniors. That's why we're having underfunding of education. They're able to get these Republicans in here, and they're able to put their agenda.
Well, it seems to me that they're trying to work a class system.
Yeah.
It's like a class system, really.
Right.
And build, I think, like the EAA
Yeah,
schools,
right.
I have major issues with
Right.
them because it seems to be building a permanent underclass.
Right.
And one more thing in regards to voting, then I'm going to go. What about being able to vote online, or, like some folks got these real smartphones that you can even be able to do it from there? And I'll listen offline.
Okay.
Thank you, Tom.
Let me say something to you, Tom. I'm supportive of technology to enhance voting. But a lot of our senior citizens, a lot of our marginalized groups don't have access to internet. They don't, and in addition, they don't have the literacy. They don't understand how it works. So technology, in my opinion, is not a panacea or a solution to the problem. We need more polling sites. We need better education to handle it. And then the other problem with online is that, when you vote, you got to be anonymous. And unfortunately, when you start talking about using websites, they can trace your IP number. They can know exactly who made that call or who used that cell phone, who used that computer. So there are still some problems with online voting, but maybe online registration could be a little bit different.
Well, that's true. That's true. So the absentee ballots are very important.
And my assistant just reminded me that when I talked about the absentee ballot application on your smart, it's at MichiganAbsentee.com. MichiganAbsentee.com. Type that into your cell phone, and then you can apply right from your
But like
cell
you
phone.
said, a lot of seniors and other people don't have access to that.
Right. And so what I would like to do is have public service announcements, education
Yes.
to tell them, you can apply for an absentee ballot. You can call in, you can mail in, and we mail it to you and make it easy for you to vote.
Well, that's important because I've seen some disasters happen in other states with secretaries of states who have, to me, assisted in marginalizing the vote.
And the other thing is, the local clerks. We've got a lot of problems with counting the vote.
Yeah.
And clerks not doing their job. So I'm going to come down on the local clerks, whether it's a county clerk or a city clerk, make sure that they are training their people properly when a person comes up there to vote, asking them for a photo ID, and then not telling them if you don't have a photo ID, you can still vote by signing an affidavit right there in front of them. Because there's confusion out here, and that's part of it. They want.
What about those people who have been coming around? I think some of the Republicans did it, harassing voters before they come into the voting place.
Well, yeah, that's and once again that's the obligation of the local clerks.
Okay.
To make sure that their polling places are places of welcome, and not a place where people are intimidated before they come
absolutely.
in and the like.
Absolutely.
And that has a lot to do, with and you go into a lot of these areas, they don't have enough machines.
I know.
1 or 2 or 3 machines. The machines aren't working.
That's what.
And there's a lot of
It would
federal
be.
money out here under the Help America Vote Act, which we shouldn't have that problem.
Well, it seemed like the the Secretary of State, the current one, didn't want to help people vote.
Well, because I believe
Because she's a Republican.
and it's to their advantage to lower the vote because they realize that Michigan is a Democratic state, that this is a blue state, and if they make voting more available to people, the idea is that there will be more people who will vote, and more likely that the Democratic Party are going to elect people to office.
We have another call, but when we come back, I want to ask you about this protection of privacy.
Okay.
That's important. Good morning. Hello?
Good morning, Mr. Dillard.
Yes.
What city are you trying to get?
I'm running for the Michigan Secretary of State. This is a statewide position. This is not limited to Detroit, Wayne, Macomb. This is the entire state. I'm trying to follow in the footsteps of Richard Austin to be the second African American to hold a statewide office. So as long as you're a resident of the state of Michigan, you can vote for me.
Who has it now?
Pardon me?
Who has it now? Not Carrie Lynn, is it?
Well, I'm not interested in telling who my opponent's name, but let me say it's a Republican that currently holds the office, and I'm running as the Democratic candidate.
And you say that's for the state who?
The state of Michigan, the entire state of Michigan.
What, Attorney General?
No, Secretary of State.
Oh, Secretary of State. Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
Okay.
Well, you got some competition out there. Then you running against Mr. Peters, then, right?
No. The Secretary of State, Gary Peters, is running for senator. This is the Secretary of State.
And Gary Peters is a Democrat. I'm running with Democrats. We have Gary Peters running as senator. We have Mark Schauer running as governor.
Brenda Lawrence.
We have Lisa Brown running as lieutenant governor. We have Mark Totten running as attorney general. We are all Democrats.
But what I'm saying is, okay, right now, Carrie Lynn is Secretary of State.
No, she's not.
She used to be.
She used to be. She's Republican. She is not the current Secretary of State. She's running against Gary Peters for U.S. Senator.
Oh, okay. Oh,
Okay.
who's the current Secretary of State then?
Like I said, I want you to vote for Godfrey Dillard for Secretary of State. I'm not interested in giving publicity.
Well, you got my vote. You got my vote.
Well, just
Okay.
remember Godfrey Dillard then.
You got my vote. Don't worry about that.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just trying to figure out who's your competition.
Yeah, but when you go into the ballot, when you vote for Secretary of State, just vote Godfrey Dillard. Don't worry about the other person.
I got you.
All right.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Now, Godfrey, one of your other parts of your platform is protection of privacy for all Michiganders. Can you explain that?
Sure. The Secretary of State has your address, your telephone
Yes.
number, your social security number,
I hate
all
that.
this information about you. And so I want to focus in on how they use it. Take, for example, insurance rates. They provide, now keep in mind, insurance companies are commercial businesses for profit. They provide information to the insurance companies, which ultimately lead to higher insurance rates for you.
And Michigan has some of the highest in the country.
Correct. Take for example, now we're seeing where cities are privatizing, say, for example, parking. Okay, when you get a ticket, they'll ultimately, the fact that you didn't pay a parking ticket ultimately will have an effect upon your driving privileges. Well,
You're kidding. A parking ticket?
well, if you don't pay it and they default you,
Oh.
if you get a default
Yeah.
in court and you don't pay it, then the failure to pay can ultimately end up on your driver's license. I guess what I'm concerned about is commercial entities, where historically
Have they been able to get a hold of information through the
they-
Secretary of State?
all the time, all the time. So what I'm saying is, as we've been moving forward, functions that used to be part of the government, like parking, for example, are becoming commercialized. They're privatizing. And what we have to be careful now as to how the governmental agency like the Secretary of State interfaces with these private corporations relative to your information.
Absolutely.
We're finding out every day how sophisticated, banks, databases are being hijacked.
Well, here's
and
the thing
information
that gets
being
me.
taken.
As I've lived in the same house a million years.
Right.
Well, I notice as you get older, then you start getting this information about, senior, different things.
Right.
You're retiring, this
Right,
and that.
right.
And I said, how do they know?
Correct.
How do they
Correct.
know?
Correct.
We have Mrs. Smith on the line. Good morning.
I'm sorry. Good morning, Mrs. Perryman. How are you today?
Just fine, thanks.
A beautiful show, and I didn't get your your guest name.
Godfrey Dillard, attorney Godfrey Dillard.
Okay, attorney. Okay, yes. Attorney Dillard, I would like to ask you one question. When you were speaking of the going into private entity, okay. I have one little question. When it comes down to say you have the people that goes out here and they the transportation people that pick people up from the different homes and take them to the doctor's office and things of
Yes.
that nature.
Yes.
Okay, may I ask, even though I'm pretty sure some of them let their insurance lapse. I know of one company let their insurance lapse, but what they do
Right.
is that when it's time for them to go back and get their life, get insured again, and they have to make sure they got insurance in order for them to pass the Michigan test, for them to get their license to run that vehicle again. What can you please tell me right quick? Because what can we do? Because I know I just had to go and pick up a friend last night because these transportation people, they don't care. And I'm not trying to be very funny or anything, but a lot of these transportation people, they're coming from Nigeria and they're opening up business like left and right, and they don't even care about these people. They'll leave them people out there for 2 or 3 hours, and transportation say they got to be there for 1 hour to pick the people up, and they'll be 2 or 3 hours picking those people up. And I had to get up and I had to go. I had to go pick a friend up from the doctor's office in Southfield. And I'm not trying to be funny, and I don't even like Oakland County. And I don't patronize in Oakland County. I patronize in Wayne County. So anyway, with that being said, I'm going to hang up. I'm going to listen to what can we do, because my thing is, after Mrs. Perryman, I was listening to your call, I had to hang up the phone because I was going to call the state of Michigan, because this has to stop. It really has to stop. And I think it'd be probably something that maybe I will be voting for you, Attorney Godfrey, in November. That I will be doing, because I haven't heard nobody else running.
Let me answer your question, ma'am.
I ain't voting for no Republican. But to make a long story short, I will be voting for you. But I would like for you to, have someone to look off into that, because this is not the first time I've heard this, and going to different doctor's offices, and I hear people.
He's going to answer it, Miss Smith.
So I'm going to hang up, listen to it out there, and thank you, Miss Perryman, for having him on. Beautiful show, and bring some more on, okay, Miss Perryman?
Okay. Oh, he'll be back.
Okay. And I hear him say other.
Let me answer your question, Miss Smith. Let me answer your question, please.
Okay.
Let me answer your question. You bring up a very good point. The Secretary of State is responsible, Brenda, for licensing of transportation.
And regulation.
And regulation. So when you're talking about, it's part of that motor vehicle aspect. So we are responsible for licensing, and you're correct. What I intend to do is to focus in on these fly-by-night corporations that are being licensed by the state of Michigan. There's not enough oversight. What we have to do is, like I believe it's Ms. Smith, we have to educate the public that there's a place where you can call to make a complaint if a particular corporation that's involved in transportation, like you say, transporting seniors or transporting folks that have physical or mental challenges, are not doing what they're doing.
Right.
So that when and also insurance, to make sure that their insurances are up to date. Sometimes people get an insurance, take the insurance down, apply for the license, get the license, and then let the insurance lapse.
I know.
You know what I'm saying?
That,
so
yeah.
then when people come back and want to sue them for some negligence, they find out that they don't have any insurance, yet they got a license. What I want to try to do is put procedures into place that we can monitor these companies on a year-long basis. Maybe every 3 months they have to come back and show their insurance or something like that to make sure they got the insurance. But these are all things that the Secretary of State can do.
That they can abuse these patients.
That's correct.
That's abuse.
I agree. But it's the responsibility of the Secretary of State to license these people and not
to
just
follow up.
And follow up. And that's what I'm talking about. We don't have that kind of follow, and particularly where
and accountability.
And the accountability. So I'm going to focus in on that. As I said, Secretary of State is a very, very important position. A lot of people wanted me to run for Attorney General because they know I'm a lawyer and that. But I think at this point in history and all the problems that we're having, we need a lawyer as a Secretary of State. We got to move beyond just the administration, someone that's going to enforce the law.
And your scope of knowledge is so vast. I think that's important too.
Yes.
And the ability to see the whole picture.
Correct.
The whole picture.
Correct. It's very exciting.
And you wouldn't neglect Detroit.
No, absolutely not. This is my place of birth, and although I've traveled all over the world, I've always come back to Detroit.
Absolutely. Well, I think that, Godfrey, I think you do a wonderful job. I'm not doing your commercial and everything, but the thing is, you say accessibility for all.
Right.
And I think that's very important, because in light of the things that have happened over the past few years, as far as voting, emergency managers and everything, some people feel disenfranchised. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, well, and the reason why they feel disenfranchised is what I keep coming back to, the structural barrier. Take for example, we're watching TV now, and you see all these negative ads, Brenda. On the different candidates. Well, to me, that's a form of a structural barrier to voting, because what that does is it makes the people think that the politicians that are running for office are bad people.
Right.
That you can't trust them.
Right.
That they lack credibility. That why should I vote for either one of these people when they see all these negative ads coming out? And it's another form of voter suppression. And part
what could you do about that?
Well, I can have. That's a part of campaign financing. These corporations are financing these elections. Well, yeah, they may have a First Amendment right to spend as much money as they want, but that doesn't mean that we cannot have them have some moral or truth accountability in connection with their
Absolutely.
using their First Amendment rights. Once again, that's a policy issue. Certainly from a legal point of view, we got to be very careful. We have, our democracy says we like free and robust debate. And certainly, I got to take a close look at that. But at the same time, the idea that we just let people
run roughshod, and they say anything, and
want.
people take it as truth.
Right, it's
and
a
that's
problem.
the unfortunate.
But that's
thing.
campaign financing is a part.
It's gone wild,
of
though.
the Secretary of State's office. So hopefully people are understanding that the Secretary of State's office is just not about motor vehicle. We've talked about its important role is campaign financing, which we just talked about. We just talked about the Secretary of State is involved in voting. We just talked about the Secretary of State being involved in privacy issues. So you can see that the Secretary of State is a very critical position that has not been pushed to the forefront and
Right.
an important role to improve the quality of life of people in the state of Michigan.
And imagine the pride that my mother and your mother and grandmother took in voting,
Right.
the importance of voting.
Right.
And it just, that decrease
Right, yeah.
has really been alarming.
Well, Frank, for example, we have 900,000 people, Brenda, that was registered to vote that did not vote in the last election. Did you hear what I said? And I'm not talking about the population. These are people who were actually registered to vote who didn't vote. And when we realize that we're the third worst state in the United States, we've had a 45% drop.
I mean, it's
in
like a
voter
third
participation.
world country.
It's unbelievable. And so the second, one of the reasons I'm running for secretary, I'm trying to up the visibility, up it, and make it a more relevant position than it has been, and dispel this idea that all we deal with is give out driver's license and the like.
No, well, I know you do more, and people. And Richard Austin, I was so happy. Well, I remember voting for him. I voted for him. I'm old. But I just hope that we could turn it around, because Ruth Johnson became, your opponent became Secretary of State, and we didn't hear any more about the office.
Right, and that's part of it. She wants to limit it to just strictly your motor vehicles, and of course she reduced the number of offices. Only in Detroit we've got the one place up on the boulevard, and in Southwest we got one over there in the Southwest. And when you go up to the boulevard now, you got no parking, and they got you lined up in there like cattle, and it hours to get things done. And of course her argument is, we got online this and online that. Well,
but you don't have, people have to go in for driver's licenses. They have to get their pictures taken, and everything.
There's a lot of things that online services can't do, just like what you said.
I'll tell you, one of the things they can't do is, like I don't have to go take a test. They just send me my license, because I have a great driving record. But I had to go in to get a handicap.
Right.
You had to go in, and I already had one.
Right.
I don't see why they couldn't just send me another one.
Yeah. Well, that's the point. The point is that online certainly helps, but it does not. It's not.
It doesn't do everything.
It doesn't do everything. It doesn't answer everything.
Like you say, everybody doesn't go online.
So my attitude is, I want to build it from the bottom up. I want to give people better quality, efficient service on ground zero. And that means the facilities that they go to, you're able to get in and get out and get your services in a short period of time, as opposed to like we have now where people are lined up.
And lastly, you want to monitor the voting.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's another issue. We recently had an election where the newspapers reported one person won, and 30 minutes later they report. That's another problem. We got to make sure that the voting is accurate and authentic. And that means having up-to-date equipment. That means having properly trained people how to count. And if there is a dispute, we want to have a quick resolution of that dispute where we can show exactly who won. Because we've had recent elections where people have won 30, 40 votes. So they want it to be challenged.
Right.
Not 3 weeks to find out who won.
Who won?
Yeah,
That's
so we definitely
crazy.
want to do that.
Reminds me of that Bush and
Gore. Well, that shows you that the secretary, whoever was Secretary of State in Florida, ultimately determined who was president of the United States.
Absolutely. Well, listen, Godfrey, you got to promise to come back.
Right.
And you're so well informed and all of that. And
Right.
I just hope you win.
Well, let me tell you, listeners, go to my website, GodfreyDillard.com.
Our
You
viewers.
can volunteer. You can donate. Hey, $5, $10. You don't have to give me $1,000, although I'd like to have it. Don't get me wrong, but you can vote online at my website. As I said, I like for people to send me the horror stories. Hashtag SOS, so that I can do that. My office is on Shane and Jefferson in the Shane Plaza right there where the old Fuddrucker was, right down the street. Come by. We'll have materials. If you need yard signs and the like, please do that. And thank you, Brenda, for bringing me on. I appreciate
Of course, Old Home Week. I'm going to be loyal. Everybody will be right back with someone who represents my new sponsor. We'll see you in a minute. Thank you, Godfrey.
Good.